Horror movies, one of the few film genres that makes you wish you still had your blankie, but also reminds you that your life isn't all that bad.
Welcome to the Rant Entertainment. I am Keith White.
And I am Kenny Lowe.
In honor of Halloween, we'll be counting down our top 10 horror movies. But because there are so many out there, we're going to set some rules for this particular list.
Exactly. The rules are only movies released within the last 10 years, so 2006 to 2016 qualify. That means no Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Jessica Biel or Marilyn Burns, no Final Destination, and no Amityville Horror remake or original. So if you're a fan of any of those or others released before 2006 like I am, I'm sorry to say they did not make the cut.
Also, sequels are off limits. Our condolences to The Purge Anarchy and the 8 Paranormal Activities that have come out over the last few years. Although the original came out in 2007, so it might have been thrown out in our list somewhere. We have, however, allowed remakes because some of them have actually been good or better than the originals. This list can include American and foreign films, and any variation of the horror genre. Anything from slasher to supernatural to zombie and horror comedy can make the list.
These are in no particular order. Keith and I will give some background info for each of the movies and a couple things we liked and didn't like about them.
Without further ado, here's our list. Number 1, DeadGirl. Released in 2008 and directed by Marcel Sarmiento, who would go on to direct segments in the horror anthology series ABCs of Death and VHS, the movie follows two high school friends, JT and Ricky, as they discover the titular dead girl in an abandoned facility, opting to keep her as a sex slave, and horror ensues. Riddled with teenage angst and dark humor, the film touches on adolescent woes and lost love.
The movie's pacing and tone are great, providing insight to the cast and their connections, which are somewhat cliched but justifiable.
And the film loses some of its gas in the second act, but the resolution really hits you hard.
Yes.
Accompanied by music from the band Liars, who are my favorite band, I think the unconventional zombie approach is a huge turnout for most zombie fans, especially the design of the dead girl. But if you can put classic horror tropes aside, you will find a diamond in the rough.
Our number 2 movie is Let the Right One In, released in 2008. And this movie is about a 12-year-old named Oscar who meets a girl, Ellie, who is a supernatural creature. And then the fun begins.
The ultra-slow pacing and the focus on romance are both its greatest attributes and its worst.
Which leaves the horror genre as its secondary element and places romance on the forefront. This can be a huge turnoff for those seeking guts and gore, but it also brings a heartfelt sensibility that makes the love between the two main characters feel genuine.
Next up, number 3, Drag Me to Hell, released in 2009, delivering exactly what the title promises. Drag Me to Hell is about Christine, who works at a bank and brings a curse onto herself when she denies an old woman an extension on her loan.
One of the good things about this movie is the time invested into making the protagonist likable, which makes the ending much more satisfying because it foregoes overdone conventions for something more guttural.
Cinematically providing details for the viewer to take cues and understand the scenery without unnecessary explanatory dialogue.
One of the bad things is the gypsy curse premise is somewhat backwards and stigmatizing in its depiction of the Romani people.
However, it's a refreshing storytelling tactic, which we haven't seen much of since the movie adaptation of Stephen King's Thinner.
In fourth place, we have You're Next, released in 2011. This movie is about the patriarchs of an estranged family planning a getaway for their family over the weekend, but are attacked by masked murderers. One of the things that I really liked about this movie was the masks used by the killers. They used animal masks. I think one of them was a pig, one of them was a dog. I thought that was kind of campy, but it was also something that was really, really freaky. I thought the masks were really freaky. Also, I really liked Erin, played by Sharni Vinson, as the final girl. I think that just the action towards the end of the movie was pretty good. One of the bad things, or one of the things that drew away from this film, was the twist in the end and just the reveal of who the murderer was. I think that took away from the movie and kind of was not a necessarily well done conclusion that tied everything up nicely, but that's not to say that it made the movie terrible. It was still a pretty good movie and I enjoyed it a lot.
Coming in at number 5 is Cabin in the Woods, released in 2012 and directed by Joss Whedon, whose work includes such greats as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Firefly, and the first Avengers movie.
All those are worth a watch as well if you haven't already.
The film is reminiscent of Scream in that it parodies slasher films, but also brings something new and exciting to the table. You can watch our Scream podcast to hear what we think about the MTV series.
Exactly. The film follows a group of horror cliches as they go to a cabin in the woods and start to die.
Satire and comedy work in its favor, providing some tension-breaking gags that give the movie a lighthearted tone.
The experience Whedon brings to the table shows in all aspects, from its cinematography to the music cues and the cast selection.
My favorite aspect was the who's who of horror parodies, being able to associate what great horror movie inspired what character.
One of the negatives to this movie is that the investment in the cast survival is lost within the jokes, but that does not take away from the enjoyableness of the movie, and it's still a pretty enjoyable film. Okay, so number 6 is The Conjuring, released in 2013, and this movie is about Ed and Lorraine Warren, who investigate supernatural occurrences at the Perrin farm in 1970. One of the good things about this movie is that the characters are all pretty convincing and they're written in such a way that we get involved in the idea of family. So it's not just here the scary elements for the sake of it being scary, there's also a theme to it and there's also a connection to the elements in the movie. Also, some of the scary moments are very well done. Especially, there is a scene where the mom is playing a sort of hide and seek game where there's clapping involved, and while she's looking for her daughter, she's reciting this rhyme that they say back and forth. And when the clapping happens, someone claps, but it's not the daughter, or is not someone who's an actual human being.
And, the movie's great. However, I believe that some of the impact is lost in the way that it was marketed. It's marketed as a true story.
Mm-hmm.
And, you could do some cursory searching on Ed and Lorraine Warren as well as this particular haunting. And it kind of takes away from the overall impact of the movie because it becomes slightly disingenuous.
Yeah.
Our pick for number 7 is The Babadook. Released in 2014, this Australian psychological horror invites us into the lives of a single mother struggling to raise her son when she encounters a mysterious book called Mr. Babadook.
The focus on the relationships of the cast with the two central characters in the movie is much more character-driven than a traditional horror film, which is a good thing about this movie.
The set design and the prop design, especially the design of the book, it really lends to the meticulous nature that the world was crafted.
Yeah, and it was actually manufactured. The book was actually manufactured and sold in a limited capacity, and if you search for it now, you're going to find it's a very expensive buy, but it looks pretty cool.
The one major gripe I have with the movie is its low budget. Low budget horror movies tend to fall into certain tropes, and a lot of those are present within the film.
At number 8, we have Last Shift, released in 2014 and directed by Anthony de Blasi. A rookie police officer guards a police station on its last night before closing, and supernatural things start to happen. One of the biggest things about this movie, and one of the best things about this movie, is Juliana Harkavy's performance. Since most of the movie she is all alone, we're interested in the story, and her acting brings us into her world. Even though she's by herself, we're not bored like 2 minutes into the movie. We still want to find out what's going on. And although it does have a lot of cliches, the director is careful enough to stage them in such a way that you don't roll your eyes every time chairs magically stack up or the ghosts look like regular non-demonic people. And it's still very enjoyable. It is also a low-budget movie, but that, that is secondary to the actual story and just the development of the whole thing.
Our number 9 favorite horror film is The Final Girls.
Not to be confused with Final Girls starring Abigail Breslin.
This movie, released in 2015 and directed by Todd Strauss-Schulson, whose first foray into feature-length films was A Very Harold & Kumar 3D Christmas.
Yeah, so a very different kind of movie from this one.
Yeah, this movie is another entry into the horror comedy parodying slasher flicks subgenre. The film follows friends watching another movie similar to Friday the 13th on its anniversary showing. But due to some weird happenings, they inadvertently become part of the film.
Starring Thaisa Farmiga from American Horror Story fame, the ridiculous plot is both great for comedic effects, providing opportunities for gags as well as scares, because the audience's suspension of disbelief is toyed with.
This does what similar horror parodies like Tucker and Dale vs. Evil do, but with much more balance in its joke to jump scare ratio.
One of the bad things about this movie is that because it starts off as a parody and it starts off very strongly, it tells the audience that it is a parody over and over again from the beginning, our connection to the characters and their problems feel less genuine right at the beginning.
But as we lean in towards the second and third acts, we really start to become attached to the characters, particularly Thaisa's character, and this becomes really important towards the end of the film.
Exactly. So it still ends up becoming a really great watch. I enjoyed this movie a lot. I know that we had to travel a really long distance to see this movie, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
Right? So, The Final Girls, 2015, watch it. It's a very awesome movie.
And you could watch the other Final Girl movie if you want, but this one is much better.
And at number 10, we have Hush, released in 2016. A deaf author named Maddie lives away from civilization and is attacked by a sadistic murderer. This movie, I think, was a surprise hit for me because I didn't go into this movie expecting it to be so well done. The setup was really, really good. I was invested in the main character right from the start, and the main character is deaf and she doesn't speak, so she uses a lot of technology to communicate with her best friend, Sarah. And I thought that that was a really good tactic and it really brought me into the movie right from the beginning. I also loved that they portrayed what life could be for someone living with a disability and how it doesn't have to be an impairment. It wasn't a handicap for this final girl, and she was a very strong character, and I love movies with strong female characters in them.
I really think, to add on to kind of the positives first, I think that the idea of such a minimalistic cast usually works in favor of the film. So for a horror movie to have less than 5 characters, I believe,
Yes, I think it has like 4.
it really works to get that establishment. Because I even felt some attachment towards the antagonist as well, even though he's the antagonist.
I do wish that there would have been a little more motive for the killer just to answer the sort of why is he doing this? Why is he attacking other people? Why is he choosing to attack Maddie specifically? But not knowing did add to the suspense of the movie, and it really did keep me questioning him and questioning why he's the one attacking this person.
And you kind of get that in movies like The Strangers.
Yes.
And when they kind of invade, you're asking that same question. But because of the way it's set up, it becomes a sense of fear, because
exactly.
Someone who attacks for no reason is a lot more threatening in some ways than someone who has a reason like theft or just some sort of psychiatric condition.
Yeah. And I thought that so that could have been kind of a detriment for the movie, but I think it also plays to its strengths, and it becomes both. It becomes a sort of negative aspect to the movie, but it also becomes a good thing about it.
So that concludes our top 10 horror movies list from the last 10 years. Let us know if you've seen any of them, or if you have an affinity for other horror movies not on our list, let us know which ones we should watch.
Yes, use that comment section to also let us know what other things you'd like us to rant about. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at TheRant20. Follow us on Facebook at Rant Entertainment. Also, make sure to click on that subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our videos.
Once again, I'm Keith.
And I'm Kenny Lowe.
And this was The Rant Entertainment. See you guys next time.